Stripes. That psychic businessman in Paris in a three-piece brown suit who stopped outside the Ritz, where the wind rose up in Paris, and with it my raincoat. I was 19 then, and his friend stood a few feet behind, laughing, shaking his hand with the cigar in it, a rich black briefcase in the other. The man talking to me had a brown alligator briefcase. Saying his name, saying to come on, let it go, it's just a girl, laisse la, oh la la. But the man in brown kept looking me in the face, impassioned, alert, speaking softly, urgently, saying, grâce à bon Dieu qui m'a donné ses yeux. He looked like Rilke, with his pince-nez, his thin frame. And I was trying to follow him. I wanted to, in those phrases like half gasps I emitted, forgetting all my French in the gathering rain, watching him and realizing how far behind the sense of his words I was, girl that I was. He looked at me with Rilke's eyes and said, with a sweet, resigned sadness, even though you do not understand, you are the most charming woman he'd ever met. He wanted me to know. And that if things were different, under different circumstances, his friend had stopped guffawing here, stopped swinging his rich black briefcase, and turned to look at Cartier's jewelry cases. This was serious. He would leave all that he had behind, leave it all, and follow me to the ends of the world. I was 19 and stared at him on that cobblestone corner in Paris, my hands finding the lining of coat pockets and going cold. I can't remember how we left it, except I think he grabbed my hands to further make his point. Yes, he must have. I have tried speaking about this 3 times. Each time my listeners laughed until I saw the joke in it too. Yes, of course, how ridiculous. A pickup, yes, I see your point. So I believe I have never spoken about this. Now, periodically, when things aren't working out for me, I stop and think to my man in brown in Paris, how he saw me when I couldn't see myself. And I think of my ex-husband, Tom, whom I called Your Grace, who cared what happened in this world, about his children, the news. They lay garlands at my feet, he called to say after a meeting, and I loved him for it. Your Grace, I'd fling out on occasion, all the while thinking of things I saw in a stable years ago when I owned a black horse, the grass and green, the late afternoon light on the hay bales, flooding them like honey while the anxious horses nickered for their meal. And then the horse named Stripes, whom they had castrated that morning. I'd never kissed a boy and my hair was long. Stripes running from one end of the arena to the other, blood running down his legs. I thought at first he missed his pony friend because they were never apart. But the blood ran down his legs and Stripes, shrieking hollow and thick, but there was no one to hear. I was at the fence now, fingers in my pockets, the jiggling blood as I followed the toss and snort of his head. He ran up to the fence and away again, as if there were no one there to hear, or as if he were a ghost, reckless and abandoned, his neck and eyes swollen as he ran, not stopping, like a wooden horse of infinite feeling, infinite pain. Thank you. I'm honored. Thank you. Okay, I asked Raphael if I could do this, and he said yes. And so I am going to read you an excerpt from my memoir called My Beautiful Imposter, a memoir of Persia and lies. I've worked on this book for 15 years on and off, and I'm just thrilled to be able to read this excerpt for you. What I'd like you to know is that it's 8.5 months into the action. I have married the son of old family friends. I come from a Persian background, and so both families are Persian. Maman is my mother's name. Baba is father, my father's name in this little bit. And I've married Davud Pirnia, so his in-laws are at our house, and I've kept my parents' names as Mr. and Mrs. Zandvakili, so you'll hear all this. And this is the night of the arrest. But how many other husbands get away with this kind of behavior? I demanded. I don't know where he goes or what he does half the time. It was the most confrontational I'd ever been about Davud with both families present. I felt fragile and a bit crazy, but I couldn't stop. I was sure Davud's portrait of me to his parents as a difficult, no, a crazy, hysterical girl was being reinforced, but I couldn't keep quiet. I had to speak my truth. Something about Davud's absence this night felt different from all his other absences. Grandma and Grandpa whispered to each other. Then Grandma spoke up. If what Katy is saying is true, then things don't add up. You can't expect a young girl to sit at home while her husband runs around free. This isn't our generation, thank God. Whatever we may have tolerated, this new generation doesn't. She looked around the table and then settled on my grandfather, who, unable to meet her eyes, ran a finger along the edge of his dinner plate and hummed a few bars of La Marseillaise. There were two sides to every story, Mrs. Pirnia countered. Young men these days have to work hard to meet their wives' expectations. She fixed me with an arch look, raising her pencil-thin right brow. I sighed and looked away. I really don't have time for this, I thought, though in reality I had nothing but time. Mr. Pirnia sought to distract the focus on his son by turning the conversation to a dinner party level. Your cooking is fabulous as ever, Mrs. Zandvakili, he said, hoping to charm us all. Nusha John, may it nourish you, Maman said. I hope you enjoy. We ate our dinner in relative silence after that. At 10:30 p.m., while Maman and I were cleaning up, and Baba, Grandpa, and Mr. Pirnia were in the living room playing backgammon, the phone rang. Oh, hello, Davud, Maman answered in a voice like pure sunshine, while waving me into the breakfast room from the kitchen. Fine, thank you. How are you? Oh, and here's Katy. She would very much like to speak with you. Giving my arm a small shove, she handed me the phone. Hi. My voice sounded like it was coming from the bottom of some lake. Where are you? Hi, Katy John, how are you? Let me talk to my dad. I just need to talk to my dad, now. Like it was a freight train, and I had better hop out of its way. I'm sorry? Let me talk to my dad, will you? Wait, you've been gone all day, and let me talk to my dad, just let me talk to him. Davud was almost babbling now. I never heard him like this. I called Mr. Pirnia to the phone, away from his backgammon game. He stood listening to Davud for a few seconds. Then he said in a deliberate, tired voice, I don't know how to get there. And even if I did, they already know. There were instant reverberations in the room, a roar, grumbling. Everyone left their chairs, the same chairs we had been scooting in and out from under the table all night long. Did they mean us? And if so, what did we know? At that point, Baba instinctively grabbed the phone from Mr. Pirnia. Have you been detained? He asked Davud twice in English. There was a strained pause, and then Baba nodded his head. Davud had apparently admitted yes. Later, Baba would tell me he'd guessed that Davud had accidentally hit someone while driving my car. Where are you? Baba asked, holding a pen over the small pad of paper we kept by the phone. There seemed to be some distraction on Davud's end. Baba spoke into the phone again, this time repeating Davud's words. 950 Bryant. Another pause, then, oh, the guard says 850. Okay, City Hall, San Francisco. Yes. Baba wrote down the correct address in his clear, clean strokes. We'll be there to straighten it out. Here's Katy again. He handed me the phone. I swear, honey, Davud's voice pled in a kind of quiet gurgle as soon as I came onto the line. This has never happened before. You've got to believe. never been arrested. I don't know what this is all about. They've obviously made a huge, huge mistake here. There's been a misunderstanding. I swear it, but together we'll get to the bottom of this, I promise you. He sounded so convinced of what he was saying. His voice, Davoud's darling old voice, like the perfume of roses that lined the back terrace and lingered in the night garden, all the gorgeous lushness in his power, tuning up and promising me, a love-starved traveler in the desert, a true oasis, this montage, that soon, if I were good, if I waited for him, his voice, his face, his whole handsome being would again belong to me, for good this time, for real. Together we would find the truth, and the sun would pour into the moon, and I was that close to being swayed. Then, no, wait, I cautioned myself. He's in jail and still pitching woo. Davoud started to cry, and while I felt gratified that something or someone had finally gotten through to him, my heart went out to him. Yet the vast darkness of not knowing what he had done scared me so, coupled with the months of fear and strangeness spent with him and alone with my doubts and questions. It never even occurred to ask me what he had done. I just knew it was dark and deep and that we were in for it. Too, I was starting to go into shock and could feel myself going under in waves of relief and near joy at having found some kind of answer, some stop being put to the madness. What welcome respite this new state of relief brought, to have this new distance in place of my usual jitteriness and relentless questions. My brain went numb as my body floated in, promising to take over or escape. I couldn't tell which. Davoud blew his nose. Can you help me? Somehow I had known it would come to this. What do you need? His response was quick. Could you maybe bring a couple of your father's lawyer friends with you when you come? I pictured Ed, one of Baba's lawyers, getting out of his warm bed in his Berkeley Hills home to meet us at the downtown jail at midnight. Sorry, no. Anything else? I love you, my love, Davoud said. I snorted, hung up, and breezed into the foyer, moving fast and out of my body with fear and anger. I knew I should have trusted myself, but too late, too late. Mr. Pirnia had alerted his wife, and she was gamely putting on her raincoat. Baba handed me my coat from the hall closet. That's why everyone wants my father around in a crisis, I thought. He acts with such decorum and grace. Grandma, who was awaiting us in the dining room for dessert of tea and chocolate-dipped strawberries, had not caught any of the conversation. Now she asked, "Where are you going?" "Jail, Grandma," I said, my voice loaded. "Jail? What do you mean jail?" "You know, Grandma, jail, prison." I drew some bars in the air. "Whatever for? Davoud's in jail." "Davoud in jail?" She slapped her thigh through her cream-colored skirt. "Oh my God, what for?" "We're going to find out." My jaw was set. At the door, Mrs. Pirnia turned to ask Maman and Grandma to please forgive her. "What are you apologizing for?" Grandma asked. "You don't even know what's happened," Maman said. "Just hurry, and please call when you get there." She gave my right shoulder a shove, a small push that for some reason hurt. Then I went out the door. Sitting next to Mrs. Pirnia in the back seat of Baba's car, I could see that she was worried about me and how I was taking the news of Davoud's arrest. She held my left hand and peered at my face, as if it were a map she were scrutinizing for clues to my feelings. This kind of intrusiveness I had experienced with Persians for as long as I could remember. It would have irked me in more normal circumstances, but now I let it go, wondering, shouldn't the concern be the other way around? No matter. The truth was all around us. Will she stay or will she go? That was my mother-in-law's chief concern. But I had already given everything, had tried to, and in the deepest way, lost. In those moments rolling forward in the car, my existence melted into feeling only the lay of this nameless land, the immensity of what was about to unfold, and preparing myself to give it up, to give it all up. Maybe I was shattered, too, by how much I wanted to give, love that would not be received. I wouldn't know this for many years. So there was nothing left really for my mother-in-law to take from my face or my person. It was just me, a 28-year-old, blowing in the wind, taking refuge in the familiar bridge lights, the dark shape of the bay through the rain-streaked window, and the bridge poles. I counted the bridge poles. Years later, I would hear the band Bright Eyes sing the words, "They can land that plane on my heart, I don't care." And I would think of those moments in the car on our way to the police station. I would think of Davoud and his family. I would think of that crazy year and the petal by petal falling apart of my family that he turned out to be a harbinger of. A fall that would have happened anyway, perhaps, but was put into motion by his presence. At City Hall, the police officer manning Davoud's holding cell assured us that Davoud would not be released until after the midnight shift had switched over, which means it'll be a wait, he said. You might want to go home and come back in the morning. No, our group said. We were all too worried. The officer directed us to the 6th-floor cashier, where Baba, having asked Mr. and Mrs. Pirnia's permission, proceeded to post Davoud's bail of $21,500. Mr. Pirnia mumbled that he would repay us, which he later did. The cashier, a Chinese woman, sat behind a security window. I asked her for a list of Davoud's charges. Glancing at her computer screen, she said, "Wow, it'd be easier for me to give you a printout." A minute later, Baba and I stood shoulder to shoulder, holding the thin sheet with holes at both edges. I took in the bits of dim blue dot matrix writing while my head swam. Pale though it was, the writing hit me with electric force. I read the list aloud to Baba and the Pirnias, read it sing-song like a poem. Count 1, practicing medicine without certification. Count 2, false medical license and fraudulent diplomas. 3, forgery of official state seals. Oh, and then 4 counts of stolen property. Stolen property, I mused. Who would have? I was suddenly aware of Mr. Pirnia passing by. Since we had entered the building, he had only had eyes for the brown speckled floor. This was the closest he would come to us all night. His amber prayer beads hung outside his gray trouser pocket, and, still whispering to himself, he rolled the beads between the fingers of his right hand while he held onto the wall with his left as he shuffled along. He stopped for a moment alongside his wife, who was standing an inch from me. He wet his lips and, squinting, also peered into my face. "Could you tell us in Farsi what it says?" Mrs. Pirnia leaned forward to ask. They had always said they understood very little English. I felt weak to the bone, as if I were about to pass out. The last words, possession of burglary tools, slipped away from me, and I paused, hand to waist, to catch my breath. I was with the group, but stood apart, though I could see in my father's face and heart a terrific new love come to life, sprung up tender and ready to show he was with me, while shock waves of blue and white coursed through me, and I awakened to a searing anger, not unlike longing. It beckoned and would not leave me for months. Biting her lower lip, Mrs. Pirnia watched me as if she could will me to stop being the emissary of bad news. Her eyes darted around the hallway while I looked over the list again. "I knew it," I said. "I just knew it." The Pirnias, looking up at me and then Baba, asked what the charges meant. "It means he's not a doctor," I said in an airy, arrogant tone. I handed the sheet to Baba, who neatly folded and tucked it away in his inside coat pocket. Then I stared transfixed at the specks on the floor. Mr. Pirnia, clutching his heart and holding onto the wall, was already shuffling down the hallway. He started a coughing jag, and Baba moved toward him, touching him at the shoulder to ask if he needed anything. Mr. Pirnia shook his head of white hair, mumbled no, and kept moving. Mrs. Pirnia looked at me through narrowed eyes, but I was a blue continent away by now, having traveled the world in the blink of an eye. So angry was I, and dead too. What did I care about the evil eye or false tradition, standing on ceremony. I was immune. I had them all beat this time, me and this creaky dot matrix diploma I'd held in my hands a moment ago. It was my certainty, my terrible certificate that I had been right all along. And I was left with what? Nothing but a cave of emptiness. What would happen to me and who I had been up to this night in the matter of my life? That was the real question. How would I banish all the lies and emerge unvanquished? Baba put his arm around my shoulders. It's almost midnight, he said. Why don't we go downstairs to wait? And I'd like to end with this poem by Hafiz. Death is a favor to us, but our scales have lost their balance. The impermanence of the body should give us great clarity, deepening the wonder in our senses and our eyes of this mysterious existence we share and are surely just traveling through. If I were in the tavern tonight, Hafiz would call for drinks, and as the master poured, I would be reminded that all I know of life and myself is that we are just a mid-air flight of golden wine between his pitcher and his cup. If I were in the tavern tonight, I would buy freely for everyone in this world, because our marriage with the cruel beauty of time and space cannot endure for long. Death is a favor to us, but our minds have lost their balance. The miraculous existence and impermanence of form always makes the illuminated ones laugh and sing. Thank you.